The bad arguments never stop, do they? This time out, ASTACIO wants to explain some of the philosophical arguments for God, and I, once again, have to explain that's not how philosophy works, and this isn't about fact, it's about feelings. It just never ends. I came across a channel on YouTube a while back called ASTACIO, where this guy, who probably isn't a Christian, makes a lot of hippy-dippy arguments that are very easily debunked, but as I'm sure we all expect, he likely couldn't care less. This is typical religious nonsense that they ought to know better than to use, but I'm going to have to sit down and dismantle all of it today, even though I'm sure it will probably be ignored. Reality is unfortunately overrated for the blindly faithful. So, let's get started.
Does God exist? I don't know. Let's take a look into this.
I hate to say it, but I see a ton of theists who ask that question, and then they fail to really look into it. They just arbitrarily decide that God has to exist. Therefore, all evidence has to point to that, but they never actually examine any of the evidence or take a critical look at the claims being made. This is mostly because the religious don't care if God exists, it just feels good, therefore they're going to believe whether it's real or not. And that's not rational.
The philosophical study of religion is a really cool topic to focus on.
Only if you actually have a clue what you're doing, what philosophy is capable of, and what it's not. But the fact is, most theists don't understand what the limitations of philosophy are. They just assume, wrongly, that philosophy is just another kind of science that can tell us real things about the world, and I'm sorry, but it can't. The religious just realize that the only tool they have in their toolbox is philosophy, a misuse of philosophy at that, but they don't ask themselves why they have such a terrible selection of tools to use. They don't ask why they lack evidence for their gods. They just make excuses for why their gods don't leave the kind of evidence that we'd expect them to leave. This isn't a search for truth. This is an endless attempt at confirmation bias. It's not something you ought to be proud of.
You know, so often religion deems philosophy as heretical or nonsense, but I think it's important we keep an open mind and really dive deep into the nature and existence of God and just how religion operates, and even more so how the value systems are related to one another.
And that would be great if you didn't start with the pre-existing belief that God is real and are just going through the motions to confirm your extant faith. Because the whole point of verifying something is not to start with a conclusion and then look for reasons to continue to believe it. It's to follow the evidence to a conclusion regardless of what you wish it happened to be. That's the problem with all religious apologetics. It starts with blind faith, then it tries to justify that blind faith, whether it's rationally justifiable or not. You can't start with the destination you'd like to reach and then search for a way to get there. That's not how any of this works.
So in this video, remember that the philosophy of religion is not the same as theology.
Far too often, though, they are one and the same thing, or at least they're treated as such by the religious. It's why there are so many absolutely terrible religious philosophical arguments, and let's be honest, no good ones.
The philosophy of religion is not concerned with the ultimate question, what is God? It's not concerned with it. It's more so concerned with the themes and concepts that we can find in religious tradition.
Again, most people don't recognize a difference between the traditions of a religion and the truth of that religion. It's one thing if you're going to recognize established and useful philosophical concepts, and another if this just becomes little more than a religious confirmation chamber. If the point here is to find truth, great. If it's to pretend you already have the truth, regardless of the truth, then no.
So in this video, the concept I want to focus on is the arguments for the existence of God. And with that being said, let's get into it. So there are three main types of arguments. The first category is called the ontological arguments, and it's used by people who want to use theoretical deduction rather than empirical observation in combination with abstract reasoning to claim that the concept of God and that we have the ability to think of God must mean that God exists.
And that simply doesn't work as stated. I have the ability to conceive of unicorns. That doesn't mean unicorns are real. I can conceive of Darth Vader. That doesn't mean the Dark Lord of the Sith is out there somewhere. This is exactly why these arguments don't work, because the concepts just make no sense. It's easy to recognize that this is just a bald rationalization, not a worthwhile philosophical idea. It's a desperate attempt to support a belief that the religious want to hold, not a demonstration of a valid argument.
But the only flaw with this argument is that it implies that there is a perfect thing for everything around us. So, using the ontological argument, people will say that, okay, because I have the ability to think of an omnipotent God, there's an omnipotent God. But when you try to think of a, let's say, perfect dog, is there a perfect dog? We could think of it, but there isn't a perfect dog. So this is the only flaw that people will use in defense of people trying to use the ontological argument for proof of the existence of God.
But it's a fatal flaw. The second you admit that a problem like that exists, you have to throw the entire argument out as useless. And because you recognize this, why did you bring it up in the first place? Unless you're going to pretend that every single book of fiction ever written, every single movie ever produced, all of them represent some objective reality because people could imagine them, you have to jettison every bit of the argument as ridiculously irrational. And I hate to say it, but the next argument you're going to try, those aren't going to fare any better.
The next is called the cosmological argument, and it claims that since we are in existence in the world and we could see the universe around us, this must mean that there was a first mover or a creator of the world. Something put us into this world and is also keeping us in existence. This is called the first mover or God, and because of this, infinite regress is not possible.
There are massive problems with that too, most notably that it doesn't actually get the religious anywhere useful. Because at best, if it were valid, which it isn't, it doesn't get you anywhere close to a personal deity. It might, at best, get you to a deistic God, but not one that cares about us, that wants worship or anything else. And when you examine the physical evidence of the universe, there's no reason to think that any such entity ever existed or was responsible for anything. The cosmological argument, like most theistic arguments, is based on the logical fallacy called the argument from ignorance. It essentially says, I don't know, therefore God. It just posits this meaningless label God because people are uncomfortable with their own ignorance. But the only valid, rational statement you can make when you're faced with your own ignorance is, I don't know. God is never a valid answer until you can prove that God is real, which of course the religious simply can't do. You don't get to arbitrarily assign the label you happen to find emotionally comforting to a question you can't answer just because it makes you feel good to do so.
There are two types of cosmological arguments, and the first one is called the modal argument. And this states that the universe might not have existed, and therefore there needs to be an explanation for why it does.
Explanation spelled wrong. Yeah, I'm not trying to be a grammar Nazi here, but people need to understand that if they're going to put themselves out there as an authority, someone to be listened to, they have to at least be able to operate at a high school level of intelligence. Now, I'm not trying to insult this guy. It could be a typo. That's fair. But come on, this really can't be that difficult.
The second is called the temporal argument, which states that there must have been a point in time when the universe began to exist, and this existence must have been caused by something outside of the universe, which is God.
Which is a claim that cannot be verified. The problem with both of these arguments is that both of them just rip assertions right out of the believer's backside that are not evident in reality. The temporal argument fails because there was never a time when the universe didn't exist. Time came into existence at the same instant that the universe did, hence there was no before the universe in any rational sense. And of course, it's just a bald assertion that some thing created it. Why? Says who? Where's your evidence for that? This is just a never-ending argument from ignorance. I don't get it. Therefore, I get to insert whatever emotionally comforting answer I want to, so there. No, you don't get to do that. Not a chance.
The last argument is one of the most widely known and popular arguments we hear about, and it is called intelligent design.
And that's been completely debunked because it engages in the same kind of fallacious stupidity as all of the rest of them do. If you're engaging in fallacious logic, if that word has any meaning at all when it comes to religion, then you're not doing philosophy. What you're doing is wishful thinking. Knock it off.
Now, intelligent design claims that because there is order in the world and universe, the world must have been created by a being that had the specific purpose of creating life in mind.
Says who? Because that is, once again, just a bald assertion presented with no evidence and no credibility. You have to be able to back up a claim like that, and of course, the religious can't do that. It all rests, as usual, on a giant argument from ignorance. We don't understand how this happened, so we're going to staple our irrational, emotionally comforting beliefs onto it and claim we found the truth. But that's not how the truth operates. Facts don't become facts because you pretend that they are. They are facts only because they fit all of the available data, and intelligent design simply does not. Intelligent design has been soundly debunked and considered a wholly religious and irrational idea for decades now. Just because some people still cling to it doesn't make them all that bright.
Now, we could look at this from Descartes' point of view in a Cartesian sense, or we could think of it like maybe we're just a thought in God's mind, or maybe not. But regardless, I think intelligent design is a very profound and fascinating argument for the existence of God. And obviously, we have the defense coming from the evolutionists, but all in all, I think it's a conversation we should be having in the most polite and respectful way possible.
We've had that discussion. Your side lost. It's not a good argument, and whether you like it or not, it isn't even a philosophical argument. It's a scientific one, and that's why the religious failed with it so absolutely. Because the religious have no idea what science is, any more than they know what philosophy is. They think the two are interchangeable, and they're simply not. You're going to have to do a lot better than this.
Let me know your guys' thoughts on this in the comments below. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and remember, all souls transcend and conquer impossible obstacles. I am ASTACIO telling you to be well, be safe, and love everyone. Subscribe, baby.
All of which is just emotional drivel, which, let's be honest, that's all the religious actually have. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Hindu. They just latch onto ideas that they can wrangle to fit their pre-existing emotional beliefs rather than caring about the actual facts. Because facts are inconvenient to feelings. Let's be honest. All these people have are positions that they are emotionally invested in, and because of that investment, they can't accept that they might be wrong. Therefore, they take a load of ad hoc rationalizations that seem to support their emotional faith, demand it's worth considering, and when reality comes and rains on their parade, they're incapable of admitting that their ideas just don't stand up to rational scrutiny. Because rationality has no part in their worldview. They want to believe because they want to believe. And I think on some level, they know just how dumb it all is. But because they don't care if it's dumb, they come up with all of these ridiculous excuses for why the things they believe aren't really as stupid as they seem. But they are. And every time they fail, they move out into more and more esoteric concepts. They tried science. Science didn't work. Now they're going into philosophy, not having the slightest idea what philosophy allows them to do, and they don't care because their goal isn't reality. It's maintaining an emotionally comforting fantasy. They don't care so long as they can keep believing what makes them feel good, and maybe get the skeptics to stop laughing at them for a little while they unpack their latest ridiculous irrational bullshit. But even once it's all proven to be stupid, the religious persist, moving on to the next supposed defense of their idiotic faith, because reality isn't relevant. Why they can't just be honest, I don't know. But they seem to be incapable, by and large, in just admitting that they believe for emotional reasons, not because their beliefs make any kind of intellectual sense. And this is just the latest theist who won't care, because to them, it doesn't matter. What the hell is wrong with these people?
Bum